Hey, I'm Jefferson with Code Warriors. I'm here again with some great people here. Leonard Campbell joins us today. He's got a business credit building system that he's going to tell us all about. I can't wait to share it. If you don't have business credit, it can really screw you up when you try to get any kind of a deal. Some of the larger corporations, they check you out. They check you out in Dun& Bradstreet. They pull your Experian. And by the way, these are business credit files. So they'll type in your company name, and if nothing comes up, you don't get the job. So it's super important to have your business credit established, but along with that, there's more. There's companies that will give you terms, which can be very useful for managing your cash flow. A lot of people, they only look at their bank account balance to try to figure out how much cash they got, and that's the worst thing to do. So you got to be able to, at company level, look at your income, look at your expenses, make it all work together, and that's where business credit comes in. So super powerful concept. I am super excited to have Leonard on the video conference today to take us through some of the ins and outs of that and all that. So Leonard, hey, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. How are you?
Good. Where are you hail from? What state?
Okay, I reside in Tampa, Florida, where my business is. I'm actually a Floridian, been here most of my life. And you pretty much nailed it. In my business, people come to me for business credit in two states. They're either in a startup position or they're in a state of panic. And neither one of those are good positions to try to build from. What I always tell people, even when they don't need funding at that particular time, is it's better to have a parachute when the plane starts to crash than to not have one and go down with the plane, and that's a really good metaphor because typically, like I said, that's how I see people. They're in distress. I have a guy right now. I'm waiting for him to send me some of the documents back. They have a metal molding company. I'm not sure what the correct terminology is for that, but they fabricate things. And there's a machine. Now, the business is fine, but there's a company going out of business that has a particular machine that he can get at a great price. And he's about $50,000 for this machine. However, a lot of things are happening at the same time. One, he's merging with another company, so they're coming into a merger, which is going to have a new name. The guy he's partnered with, I think, has more longevity in the particular industry they're in, and neither one of them really have established business credit for their business. Now here's an opportunity to get something that's going to pay for itself within the first month or so, but you don't have the right cash flow to just pull that out and throw $50,000 into a new machinery. So that's what I mean about having the parachute. It's better to have one than not. And typically startups really need funding in order to be successful anyway. And if you don't have that together, most likely you're going to die within the first 18 months or so. Simply because you don't have the cash for marketing. You don't have the cash for the equipment you need. You're not able to bring in someone to take some of the workload to build a business. You can't hire any employees because there's no cash flow to support that. So I can think of thousands of reasons off the top of my head why you should have some type of reserve or so that you can pull from. But like I said, most people, until it happens, they don't really think about it one way or the other. And that's kind of the tragedy of why many businesses fail.
Yeah, I think you raised some very excellent points, but maybe take me through it. So like the startup, which a lot of people are starting new businesses right now, especially since they're getting stimulus money, they're quitting their job, they built up a little buffer, they saw something online they want to do, I don't know, a dry cleaning business. So let's say they start up a new dry cleaning business. Take me through what you can do to help this kind of a person to do better.
Okay. Other than whatever licensing, in which I don't really get involved with that, you want to have set up your corporate structure, be it an LLC, an S corp, period. You want to have that set up. Beyond that, the building of the credit really isn't complicated in the sense that what needs to be done. What's complicated is how it's done and what are the lenders looking for. You mentioned in the introduction something about what banks are looking for when they look at the business to find out, well, what's their credit? Well, if you don't have a DNB, you're probably dead in water. If you don't have a credit footprint, and it could be you got a credit line of credit through Staples or some office supply place, they're looking to see what kind of footprint you have, and basically, do you pay your bills? There's basically what we call the 3 C's of credit, and if you remember what they are, it'll make sense what banks are looking for. The first thing they're looking for is cash flow. So if you got the next McDonald's, your particular site is bringing in 100,000 a week, that overcomes not having the footprint because your cash flow is so high, you're able to overcome whatever in theory. The next thing they're looking for is collateral. What do you have of value in that business? It could be the business itself. One of the things that I do, because I think I'm a broker for many other entities. If you have cash receipts, like you take credit cards and they can look and see, okay, what's coming in every month. Then they're able to say, okay, here's what the valuation is. We can lend you X amount of dollars. That's one of the things you have. The third C, where I say cash flow, collateral, and I always forget the third one. I don't know why. Cash flow. Anyway, it'll come to me. But those are the things that you need in a business.
Well, let's go back to collateral for a minute. A lot of people, I think, don't realize that businesses can have a lot of assets, a lot of different kinds of assets, whether it be intellectual property, the location of where they're at. If you bought, some kind of a building for your business, there are these little suites that you can buy for $1,000, right? So all of those things are collateral. I think like you say, it's important to properly list them. So let's say you have an asset journal. Is there something that you can do to make the lenders aware of these assets?
Yeah, and that's really where the documents come in. Looking at bank statements, looking at past businesses you had where it can be verified.
Well, track record is important. So if you bought and sold businesses before, that becomes, or let's say you're buying and selling houses, that becomes important for lenders as well, right?
Right, especially if no one wants to be the lender that's dealing with your first or second deal. With your third on, once they've seen, okay, you got a track record, you know what you're doing. Yeah, go ahead. We'll go ahead and do this, and and really, you can use that property many times. Because I have some lenders that will buy the property, you go do the rehab, they give you a loan for the rehab, and then they'll wait for where the bulk of their money is after you sold that property, which is a nice way to do things because you've actually collateralized something and use other people's money, to make some money, which to me is really key. A lot of people, especially if it's a small business, they have the mindset of not wanting to be in debt, not realizing that America is built on debt. Everything is a matter of how's that debt, how do you have it organized, and how does it benefit you tax-wise? And after everything's said and done, what kind of profitability is going to come from that debt? A house, for example, obviously if you're flipping houses, you need to rehab it and funding for that, but it has a value at the end after everything is said and done. I've seen properties go anywhere from $50,000 to as much as, $200,000 over whatever the original loan is. So that makes sense. That's kind of a particular type of lending, but the dynamics still remain the same.
That's awesome. What about people using their personal credit cards for business expenses? There's a lot of these folks, they don't realize there's, business credit that's available. Can you tell me how you get from personal to business credit?
Well, using your personal credit is probably when you basically you're cohabitating funds when you do that. And from a tax perspective, it gets ugly. You really don't want to do that. But I guess in terms of the parachute metaphor, if I got my own personal parachute and nothing else, you have to use that because you got to keep that business going no matter what until it's able to sustain itself. But not a good. I know a lot of people do that. Not a good thing to do. You know, um, unless I know a few exceptions where you know you borrow one corporation, you borrow from the other corporation, and the way they have it set up, it's really somewhat. It's not really their personal money, but that's what they live through that account and do some creative things. I'll put it like that. That makes it feasible, but in general, no, you don't want to do that.
Gotcha, gotcha. All right, well, what other tips can you share with our viewers on things to do to maximize their business credit position?
Like I said, I typically deal with startups and emergencies.
How do we avoid the emergencies? For example, let's say you have a business and they've been in operation now for a year. What things can they do over the next, say, upcoming year to make it, solid, to show the lenders that they have a solid track record?
Okay, basically, it's all about the footprint that you create for your business, which means what banks are looking for is how you pay your bills, what is your debt to income ratios, et cetera, things like that. So little accounts that don't seem important become very important. For instance, if I don't know, you have a delivery business, you're obviously buying fuel for your vehicles. Something like a gas card, which isn't very hard to get. You just want to make sure that whatever credit is extended to you by whatever company, that it's being reported to DNB, which is Dun& Bradstreet, and Experian, which is the corporate entity for Experian. Make sure whatever you get, they're reporting that because that creates a footprint. A lot of people I talk to, they tell me their FICO score, and then once they tell me that, I automatically know that you don't have business credit. That's the dead giveaway. Because business credit is rated on a scale of 1 to 100. Anything between 80 and 20 is considered good. Obviously, the higher you are from 80, the better it is. And that's all based on payment. So you'll see a business that may not have high cash flow, but they have like a Staples card or a gas card, something like that. They pay everything on time, and they got a 92 rating. So when people look at your Dun & Bradstreet, you're at a 92, even though you may be a small business that only brings in 10 or 20,000 a month. But it says something to your ability to pay and your responsibility to pay, and that's what they're looking for. Now they're going to look at the overall assets of the company to see what the valuation is, and that determines how much credit you're into. But that's also why it's important to build that credit portfolio, because it's possible within a year, and I've seen it done several times, where a person's, because all of it starts out with a company that will basically give anybody credit, and they report it. So you buy stuff, pay it on time, be done with it. But as you do that, that alert because all this stuff is connected. So when you get a card from Staples, well, Staples reporting to all the people is reporting, but companies that are looking for more business in providing credit, you're going to start getting letters from, I don't know, Home Depot and whomever, wherever. But it all adds up. And then eventually the banks are going to start sending you applications for a line of credit for the business itself, because remember, a corporation is also a person. So building it is very similar to how you would build your personal credit. The only difference is it can be done faster because it's based on, what you're paying at that time, not so much, who you work for, how long you've been on the job, things like that, which happen in personal credit. And really, if your personal credit is not where it should be, it's far easier to build that business credit faster. And, you and the business, you're able to grow faster because it's really a different set of criteria in determining what business credit is. It's all about cash flow in and how much is going out and that you're making timely payments. That's really what it's based on.
Cool. If somebody wants to find out more, how should they sign up for your website, or what do you have?
I have a website. It's www.bbaofusa.com. I also have an email. There's my name, Leonard, at bbaofusa.com. Or you can contact me at let me make sure I get the number right, 813-693-5300. I'm at extension 800. Just give me a call, and whatever you need. If you need funding, great. If you need to build your business credit, great. Let's talk about it. All my consultations are free. And that's really all, it's all the magic I got for you.
Yeah, I think this is the deal of the century. Believe me, I've looked around. There's a lot of these credit building agencies. They'll charge you like $500 a month. It's ridiculous. Here, we have this amazing person, Leonard, that will help guide you through all the credit madness and get you what you need going very quickly. So turning to the personal side just a little bit, how did you fall into this credit building world? I mean, that's a unique world.
Yeah, I've had several businesses, but I decided to get into the lending side about 3.5 years ago. And I kept having to turn people down simply because their business credit was really non-existent, and they were looking for anywhere from, when a guy comes to me needing $20,000, I'm like, well, gee, dude, pull a credit card out. You should pay with a different credit card. But, everybody's at different places. So, and I guess my core thing with me is I want to help you the best way I can. So I realized that really the problem isn't so much how much you need. The problem is you haven't presented a track record for lenders to look at and say, oh, okay, this guy, he's cool to lend to. Most of the things I deal with go anywhere from $50,000 to $2.5 million. Those are typical amounts that people I talk to are looking for. And it's many of them have been in business 10, 20, 50 years, but never really did anything as far as building business credit. They may have, and a lot of times they get suckered into like Capital One, where Capital One has things about, oh, we'll give you, business credit, but it's really personal credit with a card that has the business name on it. Matter of fact, I got one from my credit union that does the same thing, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, no. The business has its own, that needs to be over here, and a lot of banks kind of suck you in. They give you a line of credit, $10,000, $20,000, but really that's tied to your personal credit. Anytime anybody asks you for a social security number and not your EIN, that's being tied to your personal credit, and that's the mistakes a lot of people make. And, you go look at their DMV and there's nothing there, because everything's on your personal credit, but you got a card that says it's business credit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Capital One's
I've seen that. Capital One, I've seen that. They do that bait and switch. You should be against the law,
Well, I mean, if you don't know, you don't know, And if you're a small business, like a mom and pop, $20,000 line of credit can be significant to some of those businesses.
Yeah.
I have a cousin that sells crab dinners, and I don't know how she's doing now, but during COVID, hey, she made a lot of money, because people couldn't go anywhere. She delivered, it's $25 for this pan of crab and sausage and all this shrimp. I mean, it's really good. Matter of fact, they're gonna put an order in after this video. But for her to be able to pull $10,000 or $20,000 on just future sales, would have been huge, And one of the reasons why you really need that credit, because if you don't have substantial amount of cash sitting there in those accounts, when a deal comes, you're not prepared for it. It's just like the guy with the machine. $50,000 isn't a lot. His business does anywhere from 100 to as much as $325,000 a month in business. So it's not his cash flow. It's how much of that do you have in reserve that you could just lose $50,000 in the machine. And from my understanding, like he was telling me, he said, man, with this machine, it'll pay for itself inside of 1 or 2 months. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know anything about fabrication, but hey, works for me. It's your job. My job is to get you the funding. So, one of the things I do is before we even start talking to lenders, get everything together. I do most of the legwork for them. And then I started talking to the people at the different lenders that I have a relationship with and say, here's what the situation is, what can you do for them? That way you're not pulling credit all the time for someone and then they just tell them no anyway, You get dinged. Each time they do that, that's going to bring your rating down even more. And, so at some point, you're never going to get it because they're looking like, why is this guy getting dinged? Why all these inquiries here for his credit, So that automatically, if you got too many of those, they got, really more than 3 within 90 days, they're going to tell you no matter what it is, because that kind of looks to them like a company that's getting ready to go bankrupt and they're getting as much money as they can. And then the owner goes to Mexico and never to be seen again, So.
All right.
One of the things that people, especially if you're in a startup situation, there are things you need to have in place. One of them is you need to have a physical address. Can be your home. You don't want it to be your home because that looks sketchy. I would suggest like a virtual office setup or something along that line to at least accommodate that criteria. You also have to have a business phone. Can't be your cell phone. Can't be, I don't know, your home phone or whatever like that. Go ahead and spend the money. There are a lot of virtual companies out there. I use one myself that will forward it to your cell phone or whatever. You also don't want physical address, business number, and an actual business bank account. You'll be amazed at how many people are using a personal account for their business.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a big no.
Yeah, it is amazing how people I talk to that they have been in business for decades and they have a separate account for their business, but it's still a personal account. So I say, okay, let's pretend I'm the bank. You're looking for $100,000. You give me your business number and I call it while you're there and your cell phone rings and I'm like, that's interesting,
Right.
And then I look at, because we're in the world of information now. So a lot of things you could get away with 30 years ago, you can't now. So then I put your address up and here's Google showing me the front of your house, like, you need $100,000 again. And this is how you're operating. And then you look at the account and you're looking for the business account because everything's just data now and you don't even exist. I got a guy who flips house or remodels houses And I'm like, dude, you can't have your money in a personal account. He says, yeah, but it's my account. I said, I understand all that, but you need a lender now, and they're looking for a business. I said, take that money that belongs to the business, go open up an account in the business name. Don't, have your personal name on top of it. And then, because one of the lenders that was looking at him, he said, well, we can give him, I think he's looking for like $300,000 or $400,000. Say, well, he needs to come up with at least 40,000, 10% of his own. And the bank records he showed, he only had 5,000 in there. And I said, wait a minute. I called and talked to him, and I said, okay, he's good. We'll have, he'll send him 50,000 by the end of the day. And he's like, well, gee, what? And I said, well, different cultures, different ethnicities do things differently. A lot of them don't trust banks, and it's like, yeah, I'm not do that. I said, like, if you talk to an Indian guy, Arab, some Jewish people, they don't really like banks.
I know this one guy, he was driving around in an Uber, right? He was an Uber driver, but he also, this is in Los Angeles, he had some really choice locations, so he's getting some good tips. We're talking, $40, $100 tips, right? But here's the thing, he took every one of those tips and he drove it over to kind of a storage facility. That's like a vaulted,
right.
And then he was putting all the money in that vault. Turns out that location got shut down by the federal government because there were other people in that building that were con artists and stuff. And so literally he got swept away with that whole, really better off just putting the money in a business bank account, and there you go. Don't be holding cash under the mattress, not these days.
Yeah, and the funny part is when you ask those people, well, why are you doing that? It is basically, I don't want the government to see how much I have because then I have to pay more taxes. And I'm like, if you make more money, yes, you have to pay taxes. Pay the taxes. You'll be better off. That, shell game you're doing only ends up making people kind of look at you sideways, and then one of them may call the IRS on you because, like, hey, I don't know what this guy's doing, but he said he only had 5,000, but then all of a sudden here's $40,000 he presents in a certified check. We don't know, and now anything over 10,000 gets reported automatically anyway. So now they're looking like, okay, well, where did this money come from? You're either laundering it, selling drugs, or something, and you got to come up with explanation for it,
Yeah, you're better off doing things the right way. Everything becomes easier rather than trying to do creative stuff. And that said, I mean, there are ways, I know, with taxes to deal with the tax side of things. So you're better off paying a good trained professional to help categorize your income and expenses the way it needs to be so that you pay the right amount of taxes rather than the mattress routine. Because, I can't tell you how many times I've read, money gets confiscated by the government because people were doing it the wrong way.
Yeah. Hey, true story happened to me.
Right.
I think I owed $2,000 and I kept saying, I'm not worried about that. By the time 3 or 4 years later, when I actually talked to somebody with IRS, between penalties and late fees and interest and all that stuff, $4,000 became like $24,000. And at that point they didn't want to talk. It's like, look, we sent you letters, we did all this, and I'm like, oh my God. I said, well, gee, I didn't think it was a big deal, but.
Well, with the IRS, they will be willing to listen if you have a situation going on. I had a business up until about 2008 where literally the employees took all the equipment out of the data center because if you have a credit account, here's the tip, if you have a credit account and a debit account at the same bank, the bank can at any time, it's called the right to offset, take the money out of the debit account and put it towards the credit account.
Right.
Which they did to the tune of $50,000. Even though I paid everything on time and everything else, they took all the money from my debit account, my bank account, and the business bank account and put it into the business credit card and closed out my business credit card. And I was like, well, how am I going to make payroll now?
Hey, that's your problem, buddy.
Well, no, I made it the bank's problem. I wrote them some very nasty letters. I also wrote to the office of the comptroller of the currency. I wrote to everybody because I was like, well, now I owe payroll taxes. Who's going to pay that? Right?
Right.
That money that was there was to go to payroll taxes, not to some credit card.
Right.
So sure, the bank might have the right to offset, but I'm going to sue them for the federal government. And I'll invite the federal government to join me in the lawsuit, is what I told Bank of America. But long story short, Dell, after, I'm not kidding, 4 years later, and I completely forgot about it, sent me one of the forms that said, oh, well, you owe capital gains, right? Because the asset was now written off. You now owe the write-off amount.
Right. Right.
So I get that in the mail, and I'm like, I don't even have the equipment anymore. I mean, literally, the employees took it. They were mad at me.
Right.
So I called my CPA. He said, just tell your story to the IRS. I said, fine. So I get before the IRS tax court, and actually the prosecutor called me before the hearing. He said, listen, man, this is how it's going to go. Don't worry about it, but here's how it's going to go. I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions, just confirming your name and all that, business name, all that. That's all good. And then, just tell the story like you told me. The employees took the equipment, and it's probably going to be all good, man. I mean, the prosecutor's telling me not to worry about it. It's like, how awesome is that? So sure enough, about 10 minutes later, I tell the story. The judge said, yeah, we're going to forget about this whole thing. And so I'm not kidding. $15,000 in taxes just disappeared.
Yeah. Amazing that IRS has I don't know what they did prior to 2008. But what I found is as long as you talk to them, they're very accommodating. They'll pretty much, like I had to make payments and stuff, but they were based on what I could afford and all that, and and I said, well, gee, why didn't I pay that $4,000 the first time, but I was scared, I was like, oh, I don't have it, but so hey, you'll get it when I get it, but don't do that, so but they get a bad rep, but I think the experiences I've had thus far have been, pretty good,
Yeah, I think if you talk to them, if you explain your situation, they'll make something work. It's when you disappear off the face of the earth, they send everybody after you.
They don't like shredding their letters or anything like that,
Right.
So,
all right, well, it was great to have you, really great to have you on the show. I can't wait to get this out to the listeners. We'll share your website address here at the bottom of the show. But definitely, it's awesome. So building better credit with Leonard and Jefferson. So great to have you.
All right.